Welcome to Learning Photography with Duck. Here's your host, Duck.
All right, how's everybody doing tonight? I'm going to ask you a big favor if you can. If you're just watching and not asking questions, if you can just mute your microphones, that way we don't have any background noise coming in and interfering with everybody's listening abilities here. All right, thanks. Feel free to ask questions at any time. Just unmute yourself, ask a question. I'll be more than happy to answer the questions as we go along. We got a pretty good presentation today. We're going to be discussing we're going to be discussing photo composition. Oops, I had the right one. All right, just so you know, the first Monday of the month, I do a Lightroom workshop. All right, because of the quarantine, everything has been done on this platform. Normally, we do it in my studio here in Shelton. So those of you who want to get into, live hands-on workshops, once this quarantine is over, we'll be going back to our live workshops. Just bring your laptop and plug in. All right. Fred, you need to mute yourself.
Yes.
You need to mute yourself.
Oh, okay.
All right. A lot of background noise is coming through. All right. The second Monday, which is, today, it's all about Photoshop. So if you want to learn Photoshop, this is the place to be. And the third Monday is a general Q&A. That's definitely going to stay as an online workshop. So if this kind of remote learning works for you, this is going to be a continuation throughout the year. You just save the link that you signed in with today. Just save it. You create a little bookmark. That way you can always come back on the posted dates. And those workshops are going to be pretty much Q&A. Whatever questions you have, if you have an issue with your camera, if you have an issue with exposure, if you're having issues with editing, feel free to ask the question and we'll try to resolve the issues for you. Okay, so that's the third Monday. Which is next Monday. And I put out a little poll on the Facebook group. So those of you who are joining from either the North Haven Camera Club, the Candlewood Camera Club, or Shutterbuds, or the Hartford Amateur Photography Group, I do have my own Facebook group. It's Learn Photography with Duck. I invite you to join if you haven't already. It's free to join, and it's going to be replacing the meetup group. So once my meetup group subscription is done, that's it. I'm not redoing the meetup group subscription. It'll all be through Facebook. Okay. All right. So next Monday, I put out a little poll as to, what to cover. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing a little studio session on how to photograph a wine bottle. So, if you want to learn a little bit about studio lighting, how to deal with reflective surfaces, and how to control your light, that's going to be a great little topic. And of course, we'll also tackle some Q&A as well. All right. Of course, we're all locked down for the quarantine. So I really appreciate you guys coming out and spending, the next couple hours with me here. But once the once the quarantine is over, now that the weather's all nice and warm, we will be doing some live workshops as well as some live outdoor events. And a couple of the ones that I have in the plans is my annual Multiplicity photo shoot. It's where we go out, we create a little scene, we photograph ourselves in different locations. Then we come back and we composite it in Photoshop. So what we'll be covering here, you can apply for when we get to those workshops. Also, another popular one that I've done in the past is a photo hunt. I have a deck of cards that have challenges on them. Everybody gets a card. You have about 10 minutes to complete the challenge. Then we all come back together and share notes, share images, have a good laugh, and we do it again. All right. Also, there's been a request for some kind of street photography workshop. And rather than taking an expensive trip into the city, I figure we might do something in the Hartford area. And because depending on the foot traffic there, if there's not a lot of foot traffic for proper street photography, we'll also tie it in with a little bit of architectural photography. And I'm sure between the two, we'll get a lot of great images. So look for that once the quarantine is over as well. And also, I'll be setting up some lighting workshops here in the studio as well. Okay. All right. So those of you who do not know me, my name is Duck. I am a commercial photographer here in Connecticut. I run a meetup group. A Facebook group. I'm getting rid of the meetup group. A Facebook group called Learn Photography with Duck. So please, feel free to join the Facebook group. I'm also recording this session. So if after the session you say, well, I can't remember what he said, this session will be posted on my YouTube channel. So feel free to just go to the YouTube channel and watch the episode again. And it's Learn Photography with Duck. Just do a little search on YouTube, okay? And please, if you appreciate what I'm doing on YouTube, it's brand new. I don't have very many videos, but, hit the subscribe button so you can, always return to that channel, and hit the notification bell so that way when I upload a video, you'll know. I also want to do some separate videos, instructional videos, separate of what we're doing here with these workshops. So that'll be something that's coming in the future. You can find my work on my website, unitasphotography.com, and you can see the links right down here. My Facebook group is also down here. And I also suggest people check out photomentors.com. It's a forum that I am one of the admins for, and it's a great way of being able to post an image to get some kind of feedback from. So if you're having problems with something, what you do is you upload an image, you ask your question on the forum, and other people will pitch in and help you resolve that problem. I'm there to give some educational critiques. If you want an in-depth critique from me, just send me a private message. Say, hey, I just uploaded an image there. Could you critique it for me? And I'll go through the whole bells and whistles. So it's a great way to really up your game in your photography. And also, I just launched a Patreon page. So if you guys appreciate what I teach, not only here in the online classes, but also, with my live classes through either on my own or through Milford Photo, and you want to give me a little bit of love, please feel free to become a Patreon. All right. So anyhow, that's that for that. What I'd like to do now, I'll take those off, is get into the lesson. What we're going to be covering today is photo compositing with Photoshop. And those of you who know me through my workshops know that I am a big proponent of Adobe Lightroom. I do literally 90% of my photo editing in Lightroom, and the 10% that I can't do in Lightroom, I will bring into Photoshop. All right. So one of the things that Lightroom cannot do is photo compositing multiple images into one. And for that, we need the power of Photoshop. And that's what we're going to do today. Okay. Just so you know, I sourced a bunch of images from several different sites. The images we're using tonight, I got from Unsplash. All right, it's unsplash.com. Another one that I frequent is pexels.com, pxhere.com, and pixabay.com. All right, and all you got to do is type in the search word and all of these images come up. These are free to use. They're royalty free. You can use them to, for whatever purposes you want. So I sourced a bunch of images to use for tonight's workshop. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make those images that I used available through my website. And I will put a link to that in the YouTube channel. But if you're interested, it's going to be, I just set it up. It's going to be on unitasphotography.com/workshops. And then there'll be a link to the download gallery. And all the images that I'm using tonight will be available there for you to download and use as you want. All right, so without further ado, let's get into photo editing. Now, I've gone and created a 5 images that I've composited, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down the different techniques used to combine separate images and make it look like they all belong as a single image. Okay, so the first one we're going to discuss is this young girl here. Let's see. Young girl here in front of the this kind of like castle staircase. All right, and let me just show you. This is the original image that I found, and I said, "Oh, that's pretty interesting." But it's kind of boring in and of itself. I think it needs a subject because the staircase by itself is not a subject. So I said it needs a subject. So I went looking online in those sites, and I came across this image. And let me just turn off the background. Okay, so the first thing we need to tackle is we need to isolate our subject from the background in order to make it blend in a little bit more with the background. And in Photoshop, there are several ways of doing this. Not necessarily they're all the, it's not like one way is the best way. It's all dependent on the end results and what the subject of the image is. But for the most part, they all tend to serve the same purpose, and that's to isolate the subject from its background. Okay? So one of the methods, and let me just go ahead and duplicate this. I'll hide this one. I'll get rid of the, I will get rid of that background. Okay. And I will hide that. All right, so one of the ways to do it is to create a selection, and then from that selection, make a mask. Okay? And there are several ways of making a selection. Now, I'm using Photoshop CC, which is the subscription version, and it's the latest version. And one of the things that Adobe has really been pushing with their program is AI learning. And one of the places that we see a great improvement is subject selection. So if we got a really full house tonight. Holy cow. Awesome. All right. If we go to a toolbar, the first few icons up at the top are for making selections. And it doesn't matter which ones you select. In this case, what we're going to do is we're going to use the square marquee. And if we create a marquee around our subject, all right, and then I select the magic wand tool, you'll notice that a button appears right at the top that says select subject. All right. Now you have to have an initial selection of some type. All right. Let me erase that. One of the ways you can do it is you can do the quick selection, and let's see. Actually, we'll use the lasso tool here. All right. You can do a very rough lasso around the subject. Okay. Go back to the magic wand or the quick selection tool, and that button will appear, and just click on select subject. Okay. And hit the OK button. Give it a few seconds for the AI to do its business, and it's created a selection. Now, the one thing you have to understand about the selections that Photoshop does is they're not 100% perfect, but they'll get you a good 96, 98% of the way. All right, so if we zoom in over to the back of the head, we can see that there are a few strands, outlying strands, that just did not get selected. All right, and for the most part, hair is one of the hardest things to select from a background. All right, but what we can do is we can modify our selection. I'm going to go ahead and go back to my lasso tool. I'm going to go and click on my add, and I can add the parts that whatever Photoshop had a problem with, I can go ahead and add that into my selection. So one of the things that a lot of beginners have a hard problem with is taking your time to make a good selection. All right, it is time consuming. You do have to, have patience. All right, it also helps if you have a pen tablet. All right. What I'm using is, let me hold this up. I'm using a Wacom tablet, pen tablet. Okay. And it makes editing so much easier than having to use a mouse. And definitely, I wouldn't even suggest using your trackpad if you have like a laptop or one of those Chromebooks, because it's just too cumbersome. With the tablet, you can make a lot more precise selections. All right. Now, I've already made a selection here, so I'm not going to waste a lot of time. But basically what you're going to do is you're just going to take your time making your selection in order to create a mask. Okay. So I'm going to delete that. I've already have a mask. All right. And as you can see, it's pretty decent. I've taken my time, and one of the things that you want to do is when you make your mask is you want to make sure that the edge, all right, does not have a lot of chromatic aberrations to it. And that's where the color of the background tends to bleed in onto the subject. All right. You want to make sure that when you build your mask, it creeps in a little bit onto the subject to get rid of any issues. And let me show you what that looks like. Okay, so I'm just going to select a brush. I'm going to make it white, and I'm just going to paint. All right. So let me see. Oh, I got the wrong. There we go. All right. So if you don't get your edge right on your mask, you're going to see something like this where the background.
We can't see you. We can only see you, not your computer.
Sorry. My bad. I got to get used to this. You don't want that halo or that edge where a lot of the background is bleeding through. All right. You want to make sure that you creep in onto the subject. All right. In order to get rid of that edge. Okay. And the nice thing about a mask, all right, let me show you what the mask looks like. All right, the mask is created with black and white. Everything that's black hides parts of that layer. Everything that's white allows that layer to show through. All right, so if I have a brush and I have it set to black, all right, here's my colors. If I have it set to black and I paint, it's going to hide it. All right. This is great because as you're working and refining your edge, if you make a mistake, all you got to do is switch colors back to black and you can repair that, and you're now working non-destructively. All right. So you need to take your time a little bit and clean up that edge. All right. Now around the hair, what I've done is I've used a very, very fine brush, literally a single point, single pixel, in order to make the hair look a little bit natural. Now it doesn't look very interesting here, but once we bring in our backdrop, you'll see that it blends in a little bit more naturally. Okay. So let me bring the backdrop back in, and now you can see how we have a realistic blend. All right, just by using a single pixel brush to add a few individual strokes of hair. Okay. All right. So what I've done is I've cut out my subject. I've placed it in a position on my background and I resized it accordingly. All right. And what we are doing is we're playing around with composition. All right. So again, keep in mind things like the rule of thirds, things like reading left to right, right to left, top to bottom, leading lines, all right, frame within a frame. So here we have the
Doug,
opening.
I have a question.
Sure.
Do you ever feather when you highlight somebody? Do you ever feather, or is it best not to, or what?
Yes, I do. All right. So one of the techniques, and actually let me go back to the mask here. If you notice back here, okay, I have feathered the edge here. Okay. Feathering just means adding a little bit of blur, a blur transition between the black and the white. Up here, okay, and I'll show you why I didn't bother too much back here with the hair in a minute. But up here and in front, I feathered it in a slightly different technique. I didn't use blur. I used a more of a mechanical feathering with a single pixel brush in order to create, soften the edges a lot more rather than a hard black and white edge. Okay. And the reason I blended it this way here, I softened the edge here, is that with my backdrop, okay, the back of the head, I already planned on darkening. All right, so I already knew I was going to create darkness back here, so I wasn't too concerned on how the hair looked. I was going to use a different blending technique. All right, however, in the front of the face, where it's up against this lighter section of my background, I wasn't going to use excuse me, I wasn't going to use that kind of blending technique, so I needed this to look a little bit more realistic. And for that, I used a single pixel brush to create the illusion of these wispy strands of hair. Okay? Make sense? All right. So I've placed my subject in position, and I'm kind of using a rule of thirds in a way, okay? But I'm also using the angles here. The angle of the body kind of parallels the angle of the staircase, all right? And I also am using this doorway as a bit of a framing device. Now, I could have framed her this way, but that makes it too symmetrical, all right? And it just kind of makes it a little bit hokey, all right? So I've brought her down and slightly off to one side. Still, you know, a rule of thirds here, and a little bit more of a dynamic composition, okay? All right, so now I have my two elements in place. I have my background and I have my subject, all right? And you can see that right off the bat, they're not quite working together because the color balance between the two is a little off, all right? We have a very, very warm background, and we have a very, very cool subject, okay? You can see that her skin tone is a little bit on the cooler side, and of course the blue of the gown just kind of like enhances that. Although we are picking a little bit of gold in the hair, and that's kind of what attracted me to this particular image, and made me decide to pick her to composite into the scene, is because I felt the hair and the color of the background kind of complemented each other really nicely, okay? But we need to make the color tones fit together a little bit better, okay? The other thing is, right now, she clearly looks cut out, all right? So we need to integrate her into the scene a little bit better, all right? Our eye tends to go to areas of brightness first, okay? So for this, we need to make sure that her face is the brightest part of the image, all right? And right now, what's competing with her face is this section of the stone wall right behind her head, all right? So here's a neat little trick that I teach people when editing. Okay, if you want to know where the brightest section is on your image and what's going to pull the eye, all you have to do is squint your eyes a little bit, basically get rid of a lot of the detail, all right, and you're going to be able to see the blocks of light and dark, all right? And you can all do this right now. If you squint your eyes a little bit, you'll see that the face of the mask is very, very bright. And there's a shaft of light coming through the background that is about the same brightness. And then, of course, we have those white stones behind her head that are also competing. Okay? So we have this area right in here that is very, very bright, okay? And this is competing with this way too much. So I need to darken that. Okay. All right. So one of the techniques that I'm going to use is I'm going to do a little bit of dodging and burning. All right. Dodging means to brighten. Burn means to darken. All right. And these are terms that are brought forward from the film days when photographers used to print in a photo studio with an enlarger onto photographic paper. What they would do is they would block the light in order to make something a little bit lighter, and they would let the light burn into the paper if they wanted it a little bit darker. All right, so what we need to do is we need to darken this area behind her. And if we look just behind her back, right down here, there's a couple little spots that are peeking through that we're going to get rid of as well. All right, and I need to bring her down. There we go. So what I've done is I created another layer above my background, and with a soft round brush, all right, soft round brush at a opacity of about 10%, I painted in black behind her. All right, and because I use a soft brush at 10%, I'm able to build up the tones, all right, and kind of control it a little bit. Okay, and I also did a little bit right here at the bottom most part of the stairs. All right, so if I turn this on and off, you can see that I've reduced the luminance at the bottom of the stairs as well. Okay, and in order to not hide the underlying layer, my background, I changed that to a multiply layer blend. Okay, so what it's doing is it's taking and it's multiplying the black into the layer below it in order to darken it without losing too much of the detail of the underlying stonework. All right, make sense? Any questions so far? Okay. All right, so just that little bit of burning, all right, brings our eye up. Okay. And the other thing I noticed is that the blue of the dress has these highlights on it that are also very bright. So I said, well, I've burnt the background. Let me burn a little bit of that, the bottom part of her dress, in order to bring the eye up as well. And for that, I created another blank layer, used the same exact technique with a soft round brush at about 10%. And all I did was I did a quick little brush along the bottom. All right. And it knocks down the luminosity of that dress. Okay. And it forces our eye to now travel upward into the image. Okay. All right. Then I said, okay, I'm liking the composition a little bit better. They're now starting to gain a little cohesiveness of the subject with the background. The only problem is, had I been on scene at that location with a subject, I would have been focusing my lens on her, and that background would have been a little bit blurry due to depth of field, correct? All right. Without the subject, all right, the sharpness is the opening itself. All right. Yes, we do see a little bit of blurriness towards the back, but it's not as blurry as if our focus was a little bit more in front that would have been had we photographed the girl in this location. So that tells me that we need to artificially soften our background. I'm going to add a blur effect to our background, and for that, what I did is I turned my background layer into a smart object. Okay, and the way we do it is we go here to filter, convert for smart filters. Okay, all right, so here we are, filter, convert for smart filters. Okay, and what that allows me to do is go ahead and apply some kind of a filtered effect, but I can go back and change it if I need to. All right. So if for some reason I said, oh, you know, the blur is too much, I can go back and make changes. All right. So for this one, what I did is I used a field blur. All right. So what I did is I went blur. Here, actually, let me back this up. Filter, blur gallery, field blur. Okay. Let me just do this. All right. And what this allows me to do is allows me to control how much blur I want in different sections of the image. So in this case, I wanted the back part of that hallway to be really, really blurry. All right. And the facade, the opening, to have a little bit of blur, but just not too much blur. So I wanted to replicate that natural depth of field that you would get with a shallow aperture. Okay. So each one of these points are different amounts of blur. Okay. And what's great about it is that I can create points where it has less blur in the forefront and more blur in the background. All right. So you can see this one has a blur of 16 pixels. That's way in the back of that hallway. And the one at the bottom of the staircase where it's closest to her, all right, I only have 6 pixels of blur. Okay. So from the back, from this pin to this pin, all right, it's going to degrade. And what I did is halfway up the staircase, I added another one at 8 pixels. Okay. So we get a lot of blur in the background, medium amount of blur in the middle ground, and a little bit of blur in the foreground. All right. And these other ones are the same as this one. Hopefully that makes sense. What I'm doing is artificially controlling my depth of field. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel that, because if we look at the difference, this is the original image. You can see how much sharper that is as compared to when I add a little bit of blur. So this allows me to add that depth of field separation between my subject and the background. Okay. All right. So now we're getting a little bit closer to a more realistic image. So now I said, well, the only thing that's missing is, you know, that color, that warm to cool. All right. She's very cool. We have a very warm background. So what I did is I created a curves adjustment. Okay. And what I did is oh, I'm messing myself up here. All right. Is I used a little bit of my curves to kind of blend in my scene here a little bit. Okay. And all right, so now we got a little bit of a softer look. Okay. Not so much. I reduced the contrast a little bit so we don't have a lot of, sharpness to it. And then I added my color toning. All right. And I did that with a gradient map. And this is the one that pulls everything together. Okay. And the gradient map it's a great way to add a color styling to your image. Think of it kind of like on Instagram when you apply one of those color filters. That's exactly what this technique is doing. Okay. In this case, I'm using a color tone of purples in the shadows and yellows in the highlights to create that more of a cinematic feel of cool shadows, warm highlights. Okay. And I created that gradient. I changed the overlay from normal because this is what it looks like normal. It looks completely disgusting. All right. I changed it to overlay. All right. And I brought the opacity from 100%, which looks like it's a little bit too much gold. I bring the opacity down, and roughly about 70% I feel really works with this image. Okay. And that's basically the steps used to combine these two images together. All right. So open it up for questions. Any questions? Everybody got this? Okay. All right. So the key points to keep in mind here is that I use dodging and burning to control where the viewer's eye goes. All right. And to kind of hide areas of the image. Okay. And I used a color tone to kind of like unify both images into one scene. All right. And that's the key. All right. The next one, it's also fairly simple. All right. This is more of a fantasy effect where I took some really separate images to create more of this fantasy scene. But a lot of the techniques used in this one are the same. All right, so let me go ahead and turn these off. Okay. Hey, Brian, welcome. Okay, so I have my background, and let me turn these off. I have my subject. Okay. And my subject, as you can see, it's just a young girl in a wedding dress taken in a hall somewhere. All right. And I did the same exact thing. I marqueed around her. I clicked on the select subject, and I created a mask to isolate her from the background. Okay. And if we look here, that my mask is not 100%. All right. So here's a nice little tip that you can use when you're working around with your masks. Make sure that the mask itself is selected. All right. Okay. See how it's got the white border around it? Make sure your mask is selected. All right. Then you're going to select the smudge tool. Okay. And where's my? I think it's two. There we go. Size it down. I used my square brackets to size up and size down. And you can use the shift square brackets to harden your edge or soften your edge. All right. So I'm going to use a fairly large, fairly soft round brush. Okay. And the smudge tool, all it does is, think of it like running your finger through charcoal, how it smudges the charcoal. All right. It's the same thing. What we're going to do is, you can see how that edge, let me harden that edge. There's a little bit of a halo around it. Okay. I can use the smudge tool to kind of push. All right. And let me show you what that looks like on here. What I'm doing is I'm pushing those pixels inward. All right. I don't know if you can see it on your screens there. All right. But I can push those pixels in order to clean up that edge ever so slightly. Okay. Oh, make sure you're on your mask. I'm not on my mask. Almost ruined it. Okay. All right. So if for some reason you find that after you made your selection and you made your mask, you have a couple of edges where the background is kind of showing through, that's a very quick and dirty way of cleaning that edge up without getting into a lot of finagling. Okay. All right. So I've placed my subject into the scene. I resized her down so it looks like she's standing in this hallway. And now I said I want to change it and make her look like a fairy in this kind of like fantasy realm. All right. So I found. Let me see if I can turn off this. There we go. I found this this bug. Okay. And let's see. All right. I found this bug, and what I did is I just used the my masking tool. All right. I used the eraser tool because I wasn't too concerned about. Oh, here we go. Let me return this. Here we go. Okay. I used my eraser tool just to kind of roughly remove a lot of the bulk of that image because I'm only concerned with that wing. Okay. And the problem with this particular blend is that I wanted the wing to look natural. All right. So in this particular case, the image that I found had a very dark background, which I knew I could use in order to blend it into my scene. Okay. So that background, that black background on this wing is going to play an important role. All right. So I'm not masking this in the normal sense where I'm taking my selection tool and building a selection and making a mask. Okay. What I did is, well, yeah, actually I did, oops, I did make a selection. All right. Sorry. My bad. I forgot what I did. All right. I created a mask. Okay. But in order to make it blend properly with the background, all right, because these wings are supposed to be transparent, all right, or translucent, so it shows some of the background through it, I said I need to take some of that black and make that black transparent, okay? So one of the best ways to do it is with a layer effect. If we double click off to the side of our layer here, we're going to get our layer style. Let me bring it over here. Okay. And we have these sliders right here. Okay. And they correspond to the this layer and the layer below it. Okay. So this layer is the layer that the wing is on, and this layer represents everything below it. Okay. So if I manipulate this layer or this slider, it manipulates the wing layer. Okay. If I manipulate this layer, all right, it manipulates the wing layer, but how it is affected by what's underneath it. All right. I don't know if that makes sense, but hopefully you'll see what I mean. Okay. And what we're doing is we're using the luminosity of the current layer. All right. So we notice that when we look at the wing, we see a lot of white, a lot of gray, and a lot of black. Okay. Now, if we look at our blend if layer, we see black off to the left, gray in the middle, and white all the way at the right hand side. Okay. So if we take that little slider icon underneath and we move the black, you can see that it's removing the black from the current layer. Remember, this is the current layer. This is everything underneath it. Okay. So we're taking everything that's black within this current layer and we're telling Lightroom to go ahead and make it invisible. Okay. But if you notice, it's not a very smooth transition. All right. It's blunt. Okay. And of course, if we go too far, it's removing more of the grays. All right. Right in the middle is our middle gray. So now we're saying, let's remove everything that's light. Okay. Likewise, if we go from the right hand side and we bring it in towards the left, all right, we're removing everything that's bright and we're progressively removing things that are darker and darker and darker. Okay, so we can use that effect to our benefit. And in this case, we want to remove the black. So I'm going to bring my black in to where I'm just starting to see the background come through. All right. And if we click on the Alt key or Option key for you Mac users, we can split that. All right. And you can see that I've split the two apart. And what that does is it gives me a soft blend between where it starts and where it ends. Okay. So I can make that into a smoother transition. All right. And what I want to do is I want to look for something that looks fairly natural. All right. Where we're seeing some of that background come through. All right. But still make it look like, the wing is within that space. Okay. All right. So once we're there, I'm going to click on OK. Bring my subject back in. And now it looks like that wing belongs with her because we can see through the wing. Okay, makes sense? All right. What I then did is I duplicated that wing and I flipped it and I compressed it. All right, rotated a little bit. All right, in order to make it look like it's her second wing. So I used a little bit of rotation, a little bit of compression in order to kind of force the perspective. Okay. And just by duplicating it and making that quick little modification, I was able to create her second wing in no time. Okay. But now, again, we have to.
Doug,
Yeah.
when
Yes.
you say compression, are you referring to some aspect of the transform tool, or
Yes,
what is compression?
Yeah, the transform tool. What I did is I brought the left and right edges in to compress it side to side. Okay, so here let me show you what I mean. All right, so I took this one, duplicated it. All right, image transform. I flipped horizontally. Okay, and then I just squeezed it. I compressed it left and right, okay? And then I used a little bit of my transform tool to kind of give it a look like it's receding into the background. So I'm using force perspective with my transform tool, okay? And then once I had it looking, okay, and once I had it looking the way I wanted it, now we run into our next issue, which again, what we had with our first image, the depth of field, okay? If we consider our depth of field, we're not going to see the entire length of that wing in sharp focus. As that wing recedes from us, it's going to start blurring away. All right. So for this, I went back to the same tool. Where is it? Okay. I created a smart filter. So I went filter, convert for smart filters. All right. And then I used my field blur and I created 3 points. The point nearest her is a sharpness value of, it's a blur value of 0, meaning at this point, I don't want you to add any blur. All right, so that's my control. And then the 2 at the far end of the wing, I added just a tiny little bit amount of blur, only 2 pixels, okay? Because I just wanted to soften that edge, all right? Because in the full scene, we're seeing a long hallway, okay? So that wing is closer to us than it is further away. So it doesn't make sense to add a lot of blur. We won't see that naturally, okay? We would see a lot more blur on the end of the hallway, okay? Which now that I said that, you can see what the next challenge is. We have to do something with the blur in the hallway. And for that, I did the exact same thing that we did with the previous one and that we did with the wing, is we created a, oh no, I'm sorry. I told myself I wasn't going to repeat this effect. So I'm going to show you a different effect. All right. Here's what I did is I created a duplicate of my background. Okay. I converted it to a smart filter. So convert for smart filters, all the way up here, filter, convert for smart filters. Okay. And I used a Gaussian blur. Okay. And I only used a little bit of blur. All right. I wasn't going to make it, really, really crazy. Okay. And then I hit OK. And what that does is it softens the entire image. Okay. So now you can see that all of the background is now blurry and she is not. Okay. So that makes it a little bit awkward. All right. It doesn't blend in properly, because if we were photographing in that scene, in that space, in real life, what happens to our depth of field? It goes from sharp focus where she's at, all right? So this wall next to her, all right? I just moved it. And this column opposite her would be at the same focus that she is because they're all in line, okay? Where we would see the depth of field is toward the back of that hallway. So what I did is I created, when you use this effect, it creates a mask. And I inverted the mask, made it completely black, all right? And then with a soft brush, okay, using white this time, all right, and at, again, about 10%, I painted in white into the background, all right, and you can see that I kind of softened the edges, all right. So everything that is in light gray going into the dark gray, the blend tapers off. Everything that's white is going to be the underlying layer, okay? So black hides, white reveals. So everything that's white is that layer, which we blurred, okay? Make sense? So we're allowing the blur to show through here, and we're removing the blur from the edges, all right? But we gradually built up our tones on our layer mask, okay? And again, the nice thing about the layer mask is that we can always switch back to black and fix any mistakes, all right? So we can take and we can blend in that background, all right? So now we have this transition of sharpness in the forefront going to blurry in the background, okay? All right, so now we have our wings in perspective, we have our blur in perspective, our depth of field, okay? Now we need to make our subject and our background blend together, okay? So just like previously, the first thing I do is I create a new blank layer, and with a soft black brush, I'm going to paint in my shadow, okay? And what I did is, let me, all right. What I did is I used, okay, we're up. There we go. I used a fairly small sized brush, okay? And I then changed the blend mode to multiply, okay? And I said, well, that's an awfully strong shadow. I need to tone that down. So I went to my opacity and I just played with my opacity slider until I got something that looks like a natural shadow that would be coming from the light on our left, her right, okay? All right, so what I'm doing is I'm trying to match that shadow to what would be reasonable for this scene. And about 80% really does the job, okay? All right, so I keep double clicking. All right, so that kind of takes care of that, all right? The other thing that I noticed is from our original image, the dress was very, very bright, all right? So the original image wasn't the best quality, okay? Hopefully, if you're using your own images, you'll have access to raw files, all right, that you can control and use your highlight control a little bit better. In this case, I was dealing with a JPEG, so I'm stuck with the quality of the original. So we have a lot of very bright areas and not a lot of contrast. So what I need to do is I need to bring the brightness of her dress down a little bit. Okay. All right. And I used a curves adjustment. Okay. And you can see here, I brought my whites down. I brought my brights down, but I kept everything from like the midtones to the darks in its original state. I just knocked down the brights. But what that did is it reduced the contrast by a lot. Okay. Also, what I did is I clipped my my curves adjustment to just her. All right. If I had done it just above, it would cascade all the way through. I didn't want it affecting the background, so I clipped to my layer below it. All right. And the way to do that is if you press and hold your Alt or Option key and you hover between the two layers, you'll get that you'll get that downward arrow that clips it. Okay. And I'll show you a different method in a second. All right. But like I said, we lost a lot of contrast. I need to bring that contrast back. So I created another curves adjustment layer above it. Okay. To add my contrast. All right. Now, in this case, what I did is I brought my highlights up a little bit and I brought my shadows down a little bit. And again, I don't want it affecting the entire image. I just want it affecting my subject. All right. So I'm going to clip it to my subject. All right. And right here is this little icon. All right. You click on that and it automatically clips it to the layer below it. Okay. And in this case, it's cascading down to our main subject. Okay. And now the one thing that I want to point out is that originally this layer dulled my subject. So what I did is I used a brush on my layer mask, on my curve, to bring back a little bit of brightness on her skin. Okay. So I wanted to affect just the dress. I didn't want it affecting her. Okay. All right. So now we have the dress looking a little bit more appropriate for the lighting situation. Okay. We have our shadow integrating our subject into the background. All right. Because we have the light coming in from our left. So it's casting a shadow on our right. Okay. And then the last and final thing is I want to color tone the whole image. And for that, I'm going to use a color lookup table. I should have turned that off. Color lookup table to integrate everything together. Okay. So the way you do that is you go down to the bottom where you have the little round circle, half black, half white. All right, you click on that and let's see, right here, color lookup. All right, brings this up and you have what are called LUTs. All right, which are lookup tables. Okay, now Photoshop comes preset with a bunch of different ones. All right. So let's see which one. The Moonlight one. Okay. So I clicked on the Moonlight one. All right. And you can see that it applies a pretty bold overall look. All right. So this is a little bit too much. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I can play around with some of the blend modes, see if any of these do anything for the look. All right, that's not too bad. Okay. Maybe linear light, but you can see that's a little bit too much. So what we can do is we can bring the opacity down and we can bring it back. But that's now starting to look a little bit like our original. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and keep it at normal, but just bring the opacity down just to give it a little bit of a tone. All right, or that Instagram filter look, if you want to call it. Okay, and that integrates everything into the scene. All right, and you can create different lookup tables if you want. Okay, you can stack them. Here's another one where I used the moonlight. All right, you can do a foggy night, night from day. Okay, let's see. We'll do the foggy night. Okay, and again, we can control the opacity. However you want. Okay. All right. Any questions on this one? No, we're good. Okay. All right. Let's get into something a little bit more technical. All right. For the most part, these have been fairly easy. You just, mask out your subject, mask out the elements, use dodge and burn, and then use some kind of overlay to kind of bring everything together. Okay. So you're starting to see, the common thread here. Okay. This one's a little bit different. Okay. So let me go ahead and turn off our layers here. Okay. All right. And what I did is I started with a layer. All right. Let me bring. Okay. In this case, it's just a star field layer. All right. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to create, actually, let me start with this one. Okay. This is my subject. And I said, it's pretty, but I wanted to create more of a fantasy scene. All right. So I wanted to change this into a night scene where we take our star field to replace our background. And I wanted that star field reflected in the water in our foreground. Okay. So the first thing I did is I created a mask to isolate our flower. All right. And I duplicated the scene and I made another mask just to control the reflection. Okay. All right. Once I had those two elements, I basically removed the entire background. All right. And you can use whatever method you want to isolate. All right. And for the flower, I basically used the subject select. Okay. And then for the bottom part, I duplicated it and I used a soft brush right on this layer to bring back some of that surface floaty stuff that was in the image. Okay. So, and because I'm using shades of gray, you can see that it didn't bring it back full force. Okay. Once I had that, I can then take my sky, all right, and I placed it at my horizon. I duplicated it, all right, I duplicated my sky, and I flipped it, and I put it below it, okay? But because it's being reflected in water, I wanted to soften it up. So what I did is I went to my filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and I gave it just a tiny little bit of blur. All right. I didn't bother with turning it into a smart object or anything because I knew what I wanted. I knew I wasn't going to change anything. So I was good with that. Okay. And you can see that they're both touching right here, and they kind of just mirror each other. Okay. Now, in the original image, let me see if I can bring that back. In the original image, you can see that we have a lot of green being reflected in our surface of the water. All right. So I kind of like a little bit of that green color. So what I did is I created a hue saturation layer above my lower background, and I tinted it a little bit of green. Okay. So what I did here is I just took my hue saturation, or my hue, and I pushed it into the greens. All right. And I brought my saturation down because I didn't want it to be, you know, like a sick green. All right. And I brought my lightness down again because we're working with a reflection of the sky. All right. So we're going to lose a little bit of light in our reflection. Okay. So now we have our water and we have our sky. Okay. The other element that I kind of visualized for this was this moon in the sky in line with our flower. Okay. So I took our moon. Okay. And the nice thing about this particular image is it has a black background. Okay. The moon was shot in a black sky, so we can use that to our advantage by knocking out the black. And one of the blend modes that knocks out black is anything in the lighten. All right. So you can see the lighten and the screen both knock out the black, all right, but one does it a slightly better way, all right. Which one you want is personal preference, okay. I kind of like the lighten mode, all right, and then I just positioned my moon to be in the background there. And then because again we're mirroring everything from the sky into the water, I duplicated it, flipped it upside down, and in this case I also added a Gaussian blur. Okay, the water has a little bit of a ripple to it. Maybe there's a little bit of water movement. So it's not going to be a crisp, clean mirror image. I wanted a little bit of softness. I just wanted basically a lot of the luminosity. Okay. All right. And in this case, all right, the screen mode gave me a little bit more transparency. All right. Than the lighten mode. See how the lighten mode kind of obliterates everything while the screen lets us see a little bit more through. Paula, how are you? All right. Okay, so the screen blend allows me to knock out the black, but yet preserve a lot of the luminosity of that. Now, the other thing I wanted to do is I wanted to just make sure that we kept it to just on the water. So I used a mask to mask out the petals on the lower part of that moon. Okay. All right. Hey, Paula, do me a favor. Oh, yeah. You did it. You muted your mic. I just wanted you to mute your mic while the presentation. Feel free to ask questions at any time. Okay. All right. So now we have our moon in place. We have our subject in place. We have our sky in place. All right. So this one here is fairly simple. All right. And the only other thing I need to do is create a little bit of dodging and burning in the flower so that it looks like it's being lit from behind. All right. If we notice the light here, it's coming from our viewer's point of view, which doesn't make sense with the moon in the background. Okay. So I created a blank layer above it. All right. Changed that to multiply blend mode. And again, with a soft round brush at a low opacity, I just brush down the center parts of those petals to darken them up. All right. And you can use the square brackets to resize your brush accordingly. All right. And because I'm using a very, very low opacity on my brush, okay, you can see I'm at 10%. I can build up my tones where I need them. All right. So I'm thinking three-dimensional here. I'm working on a two-dimensional image, but I'm thinking three-dimensionally. If this was a real flower that I'm lighting, what areas would be in shadow and what areas would be lit? Okay. So I know everything closest to me would be in deep shadow. All right. So there I'm going to apply a little bit of a heavier tone of black. All right. And I'm going to do the same thing in the water area. All right. Because I don't want that moonshine coming through. All right. And now it looks a lot more realistic. All right. And that brings it from that to that. Okay. All right. Any questions on this one? No questions. How can you guys not have questions? I know I'm not that good. Okay. Let's up the ante. Okay. This one. All right. I loved the idea.
More questions are mistaken.
Is it that you don't know what questions to ask? All right. So this is what you need to do. I know, and this is the one thing I knew I was going to run into this issue with, teaching online. All right, is you're using your computer to watch the workshop. You can't follow along. All right. So hopefully you'll come back once I upload this video to YouTube. You'll come back. You'll download the source files, and hopefully you'll be able to follow along and play along with it. Okay. All right.
But can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
A couple times I would try and follow along and do it along, and then I would miss a click, and then I'd be completely lost. So now I'm paying attention to your steps and thinking about doing exactly
Well,
that. When they do everything, then it'd be so hard to question.
Yeah.
Is it possible for you to share the source material ahead of time so that we could be looking at and trying to do on our computers the same thing at the same time?
I can. But like, I can. Actually, actually, let me, here, I'll share a link with you guys. All right, I just posted a link to the source documents in the chat. All right, so feel free to navigate there. All right, and let me bring this up. All right, so if you go to my website, all right, workshops, okay, and all the way on the left-hand side, you're gonna see where it says workshop documents. Click on that. All right, and this is today's episode. This is how it's going to be listed on YouTube. All right, so when you click on that, you can see all of the images that were used for today's workshop.
Doc,
Yes.
can I make us? When you're showing us something, and you do it like it's automatic, and I'm sure it is. But if you'd say, I'm going to the XYZ menu, I'm going a third of the way down till I see the thing that says, and then I'm going to click, it would be easier to follow. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Good to know. All right. So let's go back to this. All right. Let me see if. Thanks for putting up with me. As you can see, I'm learning right along with you guys on how to do this. This is all brand new for me as well. Okay. I'm so used to doing this live. Live has a different flow, that's for sure. Okay. All right. So let me turn all of these off. All of these off. Okay. So for this particular image, all right, I was inspired by this image. All right. I said, oh, wouldn't it be cool if there was some kind of floating island in front of this moon with this background, and that starry sky reflected in the sky. So I went back and I looked for some source images, and I found this one. It just said, "Hey, make me float." Okay, but it really doesn't have a subject. All right, in this particular image, that piece of rock with the greenery on it is the subject. But once isolated and placed into, the scene that I envisioned, not quite, it's missing something. So I found this image here of this tree. And I said, that'd be perfect. I'll just plant a tree in the middle of that little island. Okay. And then, of course, I had my moon and I needed my background. So let me turn these off. All right. And I have my background, which is the this kind of like panorama of this really intense sky, which I really didn't care about the sky, but I was really interested in this water leading up to the horizon. Okay. So I took that and I just masked out the sky. All right. And you can see here that my mask is a little bit blurry right along. It's not a clean cut mask. All right. And for this, actually, let me go ahead and delete that. All right. For this, what I did is on my mask, make sure you have your mask selected. Okay. You go to where is it? Oh, oh, here it is. I'm forgetting. We're going to go to our gradient, okay? And we're going to select from our basic set, this one here that goes foreground to transparent, okay? Foreground to transparent. Oh, wow. We got some photomentors people here tonight, folks. All right. Foreground to transparent. And in this case, our foreground is white. Okay. And what we want is we want to hide, and black is the color that hides. So I'm going to go ahead and swap these two. So you can swap by clicking on this little double arrow here, or the shortcut that I prefer is the letter X on your keyboard. The letter X just toggles back and forth between those two. All right. So now black is my foreground. If we look up here in the upper left corner, you can see now it represents black to transparent. Okay. So I'm going to go black to transparent. Oops, wrong way. And I'm just going to drag down right at the horizon line. All right. And it creates that nice soft edge. Okay. So I've hidden everything above the water line. Okay. Now below that layer, I'm going to open up my star field. Okay. And let's see. There we go. Bring that down so that it matches. Okay. I don't want to see any blank spaces in there. All right. So I bring my black down. All right. And I see a nice transition from foreground up into our sky. Okay. And you can maneuver this sky wherever you want. All right. Depending on how large your sky is. All right. But I like the fact that it had that Milky Way running through it. Okay. It just created another point of interest. Okay. And then above all of this, I bring in my moon. Okay. Again, the moon has that nice black background that I can very quickly and very easily knock out just by using the lighten or the screen mode. Okay, if I use the screen mode, you can see some of the stars because the stars of the background are brighter than the moon. You'll see them come through with the screen mode. All right, that's why I went with the lighten mode. Now, another way you can do it is you can double click off to the side here to bring up the layers style. Okay, and again, this layer, which is the moon layer, I want to remove the black, so I take the black slider and I bring it in, okay, and you can see I'm making that disappear, all right, and if I use my Alt or Option key, I can split that, okay, and make my transition a little bit more natural, okay, so that's another way you can do it, okay. And in that case, you're not going to have any stars coming through, okay? But you need a solid black background. All right, so we have our moon in place, we have our sky, and we have our water. It's time to bring in, oh, no, I forgot. We need our reflection in the water, okay? So for the moon's reflection, what I did is I created a blank layer. Let me just, all right, bring that. I created a blank layer and using a large brush, all right, what I did is I made a large, not super soft, but not completely hard brush, all right. I made it the size of the moon, all right, made it a little soft. Okay. And then I sampled the color of the moon. Now, to sample the color, what you want to do is hold the Alt key. It's going to change into that little target reticle. Just click on that moon, all right? And you can see how the upper inner part of that circle, outer ring, changes color wherever I hover, all right? What I'm doing is I'm just sampling a color, all right? I want a nice bright color, okay? And it loads it up into our color, foreground color, all right? And I just go down here to where I want the moon and I just tap, okay? In order to create, all right, actually, let me bring it to normal. Just to create a blob of color, okay? All right, so I have my little blob of color, all right, but obviously that doesn't look like a very realistic reflection. So I go to my blend mode, okay? Here I want it to blend a little bit more. I don't want to blend just into the darks. I want it to blend into the midtones. So we go into our overlay section and I'm playing around with our midtones, all right? And the soft light, it kind of disappears a little bit too much, but my overlay, my hard light, linear, okay. This one isn't too bad, pin light or hard mix, okay. So one of these, let's try the linear light, okay? Now you can see it's not very realistic, all right? I want some of the dark undertones from the waves to come through, all right? And for that, what we need to do is double tap on our layer to bring up our layer style, okay? And again, we're going to play with the blend if. This top one is for the color layer, all right? And this bottom one is everything below it, okay? So what we want to do is we want to take the dark from below it and push it through the upper layer, all right? And as I bring my slider in from the dark side, you can see how it's starting to push through that color layer, all right? Once I get it to a position that I like, I want to now soften the transition. Again, Alt or Option, and I'm going to split that, all right? And I'm just going to maneuver it until it looks realistic, all right? So I'm allowing the black from the underlying layer of the shadow side of the waves to come through and break through that spot of color that I just placed in there, okay? All right, and that looks a lot more realistically, all right? Hit OK, and we have our reflection, okay? So that pretty much takes care of our background, all right? All right, one thing that I didn't touch on in the previous examples that I'll touch on now is organization, all right? If you notice, a lot of these I've labeled so that when I go back, I know exactly what it is that these layers do. All right, so this is my moon reflection, this is my island shadow, this is my moon, etc., etc. All right, so what I did is I clicked on the top layer of my background, clicked on the bottom layer, shift click on the bottom layer, it selects them all, and then I group them, Control G into a group. All right, and then I just rename my group. Double click on the label and I can rename it, okay? All right, I'm not gonna dwell too much on that, but just try to get into the habit of organizing your layers. All right, so now we have our island and we have our tree. We need to make a selection of each, all right? And in this case, what I did is just like previously, you can do the lasso tool. Make sure your layer selected, all right? Lasso tool, I make a quick selection around it, okay? Go back to my quick mask and select subject, hit OK, and it will do a fairly decent job of making a selection, all right? However, if I zoom in close here, all right, you can see that it didn't do a perfect job, all right? So in this case, I went and I manually cleaned up my my mask a little bit, okay? And I also got rid of a lot of the problem areas, okay? So I actually got rid of that bush because I decided to put that tree in there, all right? But you can see I masked out my entire island, all right? And I made it so that it's floating above the water. Oops. Okay. I also went and masked out my tree. The tree is a little bit trickier. I'm not going to get into masking it simply because we're running out of time. All right. But trees can be a pain. All right. There's a lot of tutorials online on how to mask these out. But I masked it out. I then placed it into position. Okay. And you can maneuver, you know, your island the way you want. All right. Again, thinking about composition, rule of thirds, how the eye travels into the image. Okay. We read left to right. So I want a nice soft entry into it before I hit my subject. We're greeted by the moon and then we're presented with the island. Okay. But now we need to blend the island into our scene, okay? And the first thing is that the island is going to cast a shadow, okay? So for that, I created a new layer, new blank layer, and again, using a soft brush, all right, soft round brush, low opacity, and some black. I went and painted underneath where I felt the shadow would be. All right. And then just like we did with the spot of light from the moon, I double click to bring up my layer style, the blend if mode. And what I did in this one, all right, because I put shadow down, I put black down, I want some of the underlying highlights to come through, all right? So we go to the underlying layer, all the way to the highlight section, all right? And I pull that slider back until I see some of those highlights come through, all right? Because even though the island is casting a shadow, we're still gonna get specular highlights from the reflection in the water as it moves, okay? So I bring it out, Alt or Option to split it, and I soften the transition, all right, to make this a little bit more realistic, okay? So now we have our shadow underneath our island, okay? And the nice thing is, because it's on its own layer, I can move that around anywhere I want in order to make it look realistic. Okay. Okay, so we have that. Now we need to worry about the luminosity of the island. All right, so just like previously with the lotus flower, the moon is behind the subject. Okay, we need to bring the shadow on the viewer side. All right, so again, I create a blank layer and using the soft brush, All right. Okay, let me bring that down. Using a soft brush, I went and I darkened the shadow side of the island. Okay, so the moon is over to our left. All right, so I want to darken the opposite side. All right, so the right side of that island. So I went and I using a multiply layer. All right, I added black. All right, to darken and make it look like it's nighttime. Okay, make it look like it's away from our source of light. Okay, but again, I wanted a little bit of that specularity to come through. All right, so for that, we go back to our layer style. Again, double click on your layer, brings up the layer style. We want to bring some of that specularity back up from underneath. Okay, and we just bring it up until we get something that looks proper to our eyes. All right, so just imagine the moonlight coming down, and the high parts of the rock on the far side are just capturing a little bit of the glint of light. Okay, makes it look a little bit more interesting, makes it a little bit more natural rather than just in complete shadow. Okay, all right, and then because the moon is behind, I wanted to bring kind of like a rim light to everything. And for this, what I did is I created a curves adjustment layer. Okay. And the curves adjustment layer, it's a little bit tricky in this case. All right. So see if you guys can follow along. All right. So what I did is I used my curves adjustment and I brightened my entire scene. All right. And I brightened it to a level I thought would be appropriate for how the moon is shining on the rocks. All right. So even though it's affecting my entire scene, I'm just thinking right here along the edges of the rock of the island. All right. And maybe on the edges of the tree trunk. Okay. I'm going to use masks to bring that back. Okay. So I get it to a brightness level I think would be appropriate for moon to be shining. And I went and created, oops, I moved my island before. Okay. I inverted the mask, okay, to make it a black mask, right? And then with a very small brush, okay, let me go to my mask. With a very small brush, all right, I painstakingly, and of course now that I moved everything earlier, okay, we're out of sequence. Okay, with a very small brush, I go ahead and I zoomed in, and I just painted right along everything where I thought the light would hit. Okay, and I'm still off here. There we go. Okay. All right. So I just paint along using 100%. Okay. White brush, and I painted on the surfaces where I thought the light from the moon would hit. Okay. So all along the rim of this island. Okay. All right. All right, and I created an artificial rim light. Okay. And then you just move all the way around. All right. Again, you can use the X key to toggle between your foreground color and your background color. All right. So I have my white as my foreground, black as my background here. If I hit the X key, it toggles it. All right. And I'm just going to paint everywhere I think that moonlight would hit the top of the rocks. All right. And it gives it that little bit of a separation from our background. Okay, makes sense? All right. So that is our floating island. So you can see we're still using a lot of the same tools that I brought forward in the previous examples. Okay. All right. We got about 10 more minutes. All right. This last one really, really ups the ante. So I'm just going to, unfortunately, fly through this one. But it's the same exact tools. Same exact tools. Okay. With a few differences. All right. So let me just delete these. All right. We have our subject. Okay. And I thought, oh, this would be great to, instead of a floating island, have the ship, sailing into this, into this moonlit scene. Okay. So I found this ship that in this case, it's illuminated by a sunset. All right. So I said, well, that can very easily be moonlight from that golden moon that I used previously. Okay. So the first thing I did is I painstakingly, and I mean painstakingly, created a mask. And in this case, this is where a little bit of patience comes into play with your mask. All right. Because I had to mask in all these lines. All right. By using a very small brush. All right. Literally 1 pixel. All right. White as my foreground color. Okay. I click, shift, click, click, shift, click. All right. And what that does is it paints in our lines. All right. But of course, I did that while looking at the actual ship. All right. Let me see if I can explain this properly. All right. What I did is I created a duplicate. Now you can see I've messed a lot with this, but what I did is I put my where am I? There we go. Okay. I created a low opacity original, all right, above my mask, all right, so that I can see what I was masking in, all right. So everywhere I saw lines on my mask, I would paint, all right. Now this isn't necessarily the best way, but you can see how those lines are coming back in. All right. And I just went through the entire rigging. Once you get the flow of it, it becomes quite easy. All right. Of masking in. All you're doing is following the lines that are already there. Okay. So click, shift, click, shift, click, Shift click, and you can go through the entire mast. Okay. All right. Let me just actually go back to where we were previously. It's not going to do it. Okay. All right. All right. So once I had my ship cut out, the rest is a matter of blending it into your whatchamacallit, into your background. Okay. So in this case, what I did is I had my Milky Way sky. I didn't need the bottom part, so I went and created a mask. All right. And I duplicated and inverted it, all right, to create my mirror reflection. Okay. And I created a curves adjustment right above it, all right, to darken it just a bit. Okay. Because again, we want to differentiate water from sky. Okay. So now you can see this kind of gives it a pretty flat look. All right. So what I did is I found a texture with water in it. Okay. And what I did is I used my levels adjustment. All right. So image, adjustment, levels. Okay. I brought my darks in, I brought my highlights up, and I used my midtones to kind of create a little bit of contrast. Once I had the contrast, I created, let me see, normal. I created a texture map, all right? And the way to do that, I'll probably end up doing a tutorial just on this alone, but this is the more complex one. So filters, other, high pass, okay, creates this, okay? And what that allows me to do is to use a blend mode, all right, where we knock out our midtones and just keep the texture, okay? So in this case, vivid light, all right? And I used a little bit of gradient in a mask to kind of blend it into the background so it disappears into our horizon, all right? So that creates the texture of the waves on the water, all right? So like I said, this one's a little bit more complex, all right? I then brought in my moon, okay? And again, oop, wrong one. I brought in my moon, all right? And I went from normal to screen, okay? Because the lighten, if you notice, the lighten got rid of the shadow side of the moon, all right? It took too much of the black out, all right? However, let me cancel that. However, the screen mode allows me to keep a little bit more of that shadow area and blends a little bit more naturally into my sky background. However, we're seeing a lot of the stars come through, all right? Again, because the stars are brighter than our moon, all right? This blend mode knocks out the midtones, all right? It preserves the light tones and preserves the dark tones, all right? So we got rid of all our midtones. It's allowing the light of the stars to come through, all right? So for that, right below it, I created a blank layer. I took a large brush, okay? Where's my brush? Large brush, all right? Hard edge. And then I sampled a color of the sky. So my Alt key or Option key for you Mac people, I'm able to sample the background sky, and I used it to create a spot behind that moon, all right, to knock out the stars. Make sense? All right, once I had that, I took those two layers, I duplicated it, I flipped it in order to create my my mirror image, okay? And I gave it a little bit of a Gaussian blur, all right? Again, the surface of the water is distorting our image, making it a little bit softer. We don't want a crystal clear, sharp image. Little Gaussian blur, soften the edges, and we have a pretty natural looking reflection, okay? But now we just need a little bit of the technical things, all right? We have a very strong horizon line, okay? There's nothing wrong with that horizon, but it's a little bit in your face. So what I did is I created a new blank layer. I sampled, I took a brush, I sampled the color, and I created a band all the way across. Changed the mode to multiply and brought my opacity down until that line just disappears, right? So I bring it down and I start bringing it up until that horizon line just disappears, okay? It obscures it, so about 80%, okay? But because it's in our multiply blend, we're allowed to see some of the lightness from that sky and water come through, okay? All right, so that takes care of our reflection, okay? Now it's time to create the reflection of the ship, all right? What I did is I duplicated the ship, all right? And I combined the mask in with the copy, all right? I flipped it, okay? Did a Gaussian blur. Again, it's a reflection, so we don't need it to be crystal clear sharp, okay? Flipped it, all right? And I used a mask to replicate the ripples in the water, all right? And the way I did that is I went back to my original image of the water. I took a section of it, converted it to black and white, copied it, and pasted it into the mask of my ship. All right. And then I just maneuvered it around until I found a position that I liked. Okay. So once you have your mask selected, you can actually move that around and you can visually see how it interacts with your image. So I found a location where I liked the effect in the water, and that was it. All right. So it's a simple technique once you understand it that adds a lot of realism. All right. Then we needed to just darken our shadow. All right, because again, it's behind the ship. We don't need it as bright as our reflection. All right, so I darkened it with a curves adjustment. Okay. All right. No, that's not it. Okay. And the other thing that I wanted to do was I wanted to bring out the lights in the back part of the ship. All right, so if I zoom in here, there are some windows here all right, that right now are dark. I wanted to create a little bit of life, okay? And for that, what I did is I created I took a brush and I created 3 spots of yellow, all right? And then using my blend modes, okay, my soft light, all right, lit up those windows, okay? Not quite enough, so what I did is I duplicated it, all right? And I also decided I was going to add a little bit of highlight in a few other areas of the boat. So using the same brush, I resized it, okay? Oh, come on, brush, brush, brush. I resized it down appropriately, and using the same color, yellow, I just brushed in the little highlight areas, all right, wherever I wanted them, okay? And that is pretty much it, all right? I know I kind of flew this one, but we're way over our limit here, okay? And then the last thing I did is I just used a curves adjustment to kind of brighten things up a little bit. All right, add a little bit of contrast. Okay. All right. Any questions?
I don't have a question, but I have a suggestion.
Sure.
That would really help us. Well, one of them I want to talk to you offline about, but this one here would be handy if the finished products were somewhere we could see them, sort of as a reference.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe even if you put them in the same workshop document, so that
yeah, Unfortunately, it doesn't take PSD files. I was going to upload the actual PSD file, but SmugBug won't let me upload PSD files. So I'm going to see if I can find an alternate form.
But no, I was saying if we had, even if you uploaded a nice JPEG so that we could see what it looked like.
Yeah. The other thing, like I said, this was the first Photoshop class that I'm doing online. So I'm still learning along with you guys. I'm just learning something a little bit differently. So I think what I did is I got a little bit too ambitious with this one. So what I'll do is maybe next time just stick to one and walk through from beginning to end rather than showing the steps, kind of like what I did here.
Well, what I was going to say, Doug, was that for my suggestion, but what this needs is sort of an entry video, like you just say, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to cover this thing. I'm going to turn these pictures into this. And these are the tools I'm going to be using and the steps, so that when we're in there watching it, we kind of know when you're getting there, because when you're in the weeds there, that's when we sometimes it's harder to keep track of where you are and that type of thing.
Right. Like I said, I'm kind of still learning also. But any suggestions that it makes it a little bit clearer for you guys, I'm more than willing to listen. So those of you who hung out to the bitter end here, I appreciate it. If you can, go ahead and leave your suggestions in the Facebook page. Give me your feedback. Don't worry about hurting my feelings. If you got something negative to say, something that you didn't like, go ahead and put it in, because that only helps me make it better the next time. Okay. So I really appreciate you guys sticking it out. I know I kind of flew through a little bit on this, and I hope to change that in the future as I nail this format down a little bit more. Okay. Any other questions? Fred asked what the Facebook page is. It's the Learn Photography with Duck page. So go to Facebook, Facebook groups, Learn Photography with Duck. Okay. And I will be posting updates on workshops there as well. All right. Now, like I said at the beginning, the next Monday, it's actually going to be a studio setup. We're actually going to be playing with lights and lighting a subject. You'll get to see how the lights are built up and how the end result is put together, both in front of the camera and behind the camera. Okay. And hopefully you guys can join me. Same bat time, same bat channel. Okay. All right. So I will make the final images available on the same link that I linked to you guys in the chat. All right. The Learn Photography with Duck. Oh no, I'm sorry. The workshops on my website, workshops. Actually, here we go. UnitedPhotography.com, workshops, workshop documents. Okay. So from workshops, you come down right to the menu on the side, click on workshop documents, and it's going to bring you here, and then just click on here. All right. So these right here are all the source images. All right. And what I'll do is I'll also upload the composites. Okay.
Alrighty. So everything will be on the Facebook page, like invites and all that will be on the Facebook page. Learn Photography with Duck.
Correct.
Okay, good.
All right. So yeah, so if you sign up for my group, you'll get notification every time I post. But like I said, the first Monday, actually, where is it? Yeah, the first Monday is Lightroom. The second Monday, which is today, is Photoshop, and then the third Monday is Q&A or some kind of demonstration. All right. So in this case, next Monday, I'm gonna be demonstrating how to light and photograph a wine bottle. Okay. All righty, guys. I really do appreciate you hanging out with me. All right. Again, I have my links here, right here. UnitedPhotography.com is the website. The Facebook page, groups, Learn Photography with Duck. All right, because I'm getting rid of Meetup. We have a couple people here from Photo Mentores. All right, like I said, it's a great way of getting feedback on your image. You have a problem, you post it. You ask the question, hey guys, I can't get this to look right because, of such and such. And people will give you their opinion based on their experience on how to overcome those issues. All right. It's also a great community to share images and build relationships with people from all different parts of the world. We got people from Australia, we got people from England, and of course, Paula's from Mississippi, and she's been isolated in her little cabin these past few weeks, along with everybody else. And she, you got to check out her work. What she does with those damn birds is pretty impressive. I can't wait for her to publish her first book. Hint, hint. Okay. Of course, you're welcome. And of course, I just set up a Patreon. So if you appreciate what I do with my teaching, both here online and in the live workshops, I would love to see you become a patron. All right. So that said, I thank you once again and hope to see you next Monday. Have a good week. Stay safe. Wash your hands. Keep 6 feet away. All that good stuff. Okay.
I'm 6 feet away from my screen. Thanks, Doug.
All righty, guys. Take care.
Thank you for watching Learning Photography with Duck. Brought to you in association with Milford Photo, your local full-service camera store. Located in downtown Milford, Connecticut. Milford Photo offers you a personalized shopping experience, from the latest camera gear to printing and framing services. And, of course, educational workshops to teach you the finer aspects of photography. Don't forget to tell them Duck sent you.